Every company says they're becoming AI powered, but the data tells a very different story. Nearly 70% of organizations are already using AI in everyday work. However, only about 10% say they're fully operationalized in a meaningful way. Most leaders still describe AI as promising but immature. They're experimenting, but they're struggling to turn momentum into outcomes. Governance, ROI, security, integration, that's where initiatives stall. And customers are no longer patient with experimentation. They're asking for proof, they're asking for transparency, and they're asking who can actually execute. That's why the biggest shift happening in the channel right now isn't technological, it's operational. The winners won't be the partners talking about AI the most, they'll be the ones operationalizing it the best. And that's the growth gap we're talking about today. Welcome to The Path to Growth, where we talk with leaders across the technology ecosystem about what's driving actual growth in the channel. Today, I'm joined by Nina Harding of Microsoft. Nina leads one of the industry's largest partner ecosystems at a moment when AI is reshaping how organizations buy, sell, and of course, deliver technology. Nina, welcome.
Oh, thanks so much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you, especially with your role in Microsoft at this moment. So I want to start, let's just kind of talk a little bit broadly about the market. It does feel a little bit that sort of AI adoption is perhaps moving faster than real sort of business impact or outcomes. So where do you see the biggest gap right now between, the excitement that's in the market and you literally can't open a newspaper? I do still get a newspaper or a website and not see a story about AI and the actual business outcomes.
Yeah, it's a great question. There literally is not a CEO today that isn't being asked about what's your AI strategy? What does that mean? And Microsoft is in a wonderful position that it is such a door opener to have really prudent conversations with all of the companies. But having the conversation and having a strategy is very different because that's about like, how do you deploy AI in your environment into how are you actually transforming the way you drive business in your environment? And they're absolutely not the same thing. I would say deployment is something that we used to talk about a little bit with certain products, right? Transformation is not just the deployment, but it's also the adoption. So there was a study that came out this week, in fact, that found the world's 2,000 largest public companies are sitting on nearly about 18 trillion of untapped AI value. And that's because that organizational foundation underneath it isn't ready. And that's one of the things that as you're having that AI conversation, you really need to understand, like, the technology is there, but are you as a company there? AI is now really exposing what I would say is that weakness that the business might have in some of those foundational layers. And in order for companies really to win with AI, and to leverage AI effectively, it's not just about embracing AI, but it's about some of the hard organizational work that has to happen in order to get ready for it.
Well, first off, 18 trillion obviously is a
big number, right?
Is a big number, even in today's craziness. So help me understand though, or just define that a little bit more, Nina. When you say untapped value, what are you really talking about there?
Yeah. So everyone wants to talk about AI, right? And we can all get together and come up with a million use cases or different ways that AI can help us in our environments. And we can do that both from an individual employee level and how it's going to change how I engage and drive my job, to how do business teams do it, to how do we engage with customers, how do we bend innovation and transform our business. But the reality is as you're having those conversations, very quickly, the conversation comes down to data. What are we doing with our data, right? Security, who has access to what information when you have AI, and workflow redesign. AI is just the tip of the iceberg. And beneath it, that you have to think about like data governance, the quality, You have
Yeah.
to talk about the security and the access management to that data. And if you skip that foundational level, right, you're going to fail with AI because that's where we see the fear. That's where we see the
Yeah.
risk if you don't have that. The other thing that I mentioned a little bit was around workflow redesign. A lot of times people are just looking at AI to come on top of things that they're already doing. Hey, can I do this process more efficiently? Versus rethinking, how do we engage the customer or how do we redefine this whole process? And that's where you see the real unlock with AI.
Let me just pull on that a little bit more. So in that instance, the organizations that tend to be, I guess, let's say, creating more value, right? More business outcomes, more business value versus perhaps, that experimentation or just sort of putting AI on top of the current workflows. Are those the companies where they're literally working with their HR departments, with their business leaders, with their customer advocates right the way across the spectrum to totally break down the silos and just reimagine what could we look like and how
Yeah.
could we better serve our customer?
That's you're spot on. For me, where we've been guiding our partners quite a bit is it's not about the technology anymore. It's around how do you get to what you're talking about, like that solutioning and really being their business partner on redefining things. And what that means is you have to be able to go down into that industry layer and even
Yeah.
sub-industry layer. And then to your point, we need to be able to go into the work group. So within healthcare and life sciences, right? And you're on the provider level, you're a hospital. Now I need to think about how will AI help with the HR and talent population versus how does it help in submitting claims, right? To the payer system, right?
Yeah.
Those are very different scenarios. So when you start to break it down by industry, by sub industry, by persona and group, and then you start really tackling the problems, that's how you get to the outcomes that actually really benefit the companies.
Just to kind of wrap up that, it really feels like we're at this point now where the limitations are actually not technology based. They're actually human and
Isn't
our
that interesting?
willingness to adopt and adapt.
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's human both in recognizing the potential of what it can do, right? And so reimagining things, but it's also on adoption, right? Are people really looking in the mirror and how open am I to doing things differently? How am I scared? Am I willing to put my hands on a keyboard and actually try something new?
Yeah.
Um, and it's actually magic when you do.
It is. I mean, I think we're a great example of Main Street. I talk this to our town halls, our employees and our owners all the time. We're sort of 450 person business. So we're in that sort of small, medium size, depending on where you are in the world. And we've gone from, just a tiny group of us having access and seeing could we break it and therefore we shouldn't give everyone access to now the entire company has full AI access to last week on a town hall, we gave out 5 cash awards to winners for AI adoption within different workflows with different categories. As we basically head on this path of sort of being AI native as an organization and reimagining those work streams, and we've gone from sort of 2 kind of agents, doing some really basic things to, at the latest count, I think we have 47 self-deployed agents in the business where people at the coalface recognize that this part of my job takes way too long and it's incredibly low value and they're using AI to solve for it so they can go do something of much higher value.
I mean, we're doing the same thing, Matt. I mean, we're talking to a partner audience here, and you think about your partner development managers, right? How much of their time is focused in what I almost say back office activity versus doing the strategic part of the role, right?
Yeah.
Advising, really driving forward. We're doing the same thing. We have over 50 agents that you can pull down as a PDM and start doing your job differently. Hey,
Yeah.
what does our joint customer list look like? pull the partner's customer list, Microsoft's, and in a matter of seconds, you have that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the joint value proposition of our products working together? That's an agent too. It's just a beginning, but it gets
Yeah.
the conversation started. Briefings, customer target lists, all these kinds of things. These are all tools that agents can provide. So as a PDM, now I'm super smart.
Yeah.
And now I can have a really strategic conversation versus saying, hey, let's identify 10 companies and go after them together,
Yeah.
right? It's a
Yeah.
very different
Yeah.
conversation with than, oh, wow, I understand our value proposition. I understand the patterns. Let's go try these at these specific companies. And this is why.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, I mean, I have friends in legal, I have friends in medical, and I'm just saying to them all the time, I know you read a lot of hype and you're asking me all the time, is it hype? It's way bigger than you imagine. So let's pick on that a little bit, because you mentioned partner, right? So let's focus on the partners. And as we both just said, right, the opportunity around AI is absolutely enormous, and particularly for partners. I think that's one of the things that's kind of really come through over the last 18 months as adoption started to accelerate. But not every partner yet is necessarily ready to lead customers through this transformation, to use your word, right, successfully. So what would you say separates an AI ready partners from non-AI ready partners?
Boy, a bunch of things. Some of the things you've even mentioned. First is how they actually adopted it internally, right? Are they customer zero? Is it part of the way they as a company think and act and even drive their own business? If you're not using it in your own business, how are you really truly going to advise or help other customers see the true value or reframe the usage of AI? Because it's not just about improved productivity, it's really around bending that innovation so that you're doing something demonstrable that a CFO can actually see the difference of where AI is tracked. And that's where I think it starts. It starts with that internal use. Then the second piece, surprisingly, we're spending a lot of time on is how do you shift the conversation with the customer itself? That pre-sales motion is very different today than it has been in the past. So whether you're talking about distributors or even services partners or even ISVs, right, or software development companies, the conversation is no longer about the technology and the products. It's about what you can do and help them
Yeah.
reimagine for the outcomes you want. And then that means that your company also has to be ready for proposals that are outcome based versus transaction based. Are you ready to put your dollars and cents where you're making promises to the customer on what they're going to see from the return on investment? That's really, really important, right? And then thirdly, you have to have the expertise, right? You have to have that expertise. And that expertise from a technical perspective isn't just about the technology, but it's about the change management and driving the adoption, right? Um, Putting something in place, but if no one uses it, it's useless.
Yeah. So, and for partners, it is, I think, one of their unique strengths, selling points is typically they're deeply embedded in their customer base, right? And they've worked with those organizations for many years, and they typically understand the nuances, the workflows, and so taking that approach, that outcomes versus transactions, as you mentioned, definitely I think gives them an edge. So where would you say though most partners are underestimating what it takes to deliver on those outcomes, if we focus on that right now?
I think everyone, not just partners, but even customers, are underestimating the change management that comes afterwards.
Right.
I think that's the most obvious one because there has to be that whole cycle of adoption. Even back in my SAP days, right? Getting the end users to adopt the new systems or change their processes, that took a bit of work. This is even more than that, right? This is very transformative. The other piece is what we talked about earlier today was really around the data and the security. It is, I think, not responsible, and we advocate for responsible AI usage to start proliferating the tools and creating the environment if you don't have the data securely locked down.
Yeah.
and you don't have it clean. It will give you the wrong answers. It will expose information you don't want everyone to have. And that could be very dangerous in an environment. So really thinking about that compliance and that readiness piece, absolutely critical. And that is what I think everyone's underestimating. If I can add one more, so there's a lot of underestimation, Matt, you might say, but the other one is about the skilling. We are in a market that is moving so incredibly fast. And what you learned 2 months ago and what is of preference or the latest thing is so different 2 months later.
Yeah.
So, for example, with my team, we have Learning Fridays, and we've actually carved out 20% of the work week just to focus on self-learning and education. Now, that's becoming an even greater standard at Microsoft in general. That means as a company from the top down, you have to commit that in order to stay abreast of everything, that you probably have to take people and allow them more bench time or allow them more self-learning and reflection time to really be where they need to be in the market.
That's interesting. So how are you, I guess I would say not enforcing that because, but encouraging that behavior and making sure that people have that opportunity to find that 20%. How does that work?
Well, the first thing we've done is we've carved out Fridays as Learning Fridays. So we've
Right.
announced it, and then I'm not allowed to structure any meetings on Fridays. So it is a no
Interesting.
meeting Friday culture. The other thing we've done is we've put in what I call the Culture Club, right? And we have an AI
great
best
band, by the way.
club.
Great band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I know. I love them. And what these two kind of task forces do is on Fridays, there is a best practice sharing. So here are tips and tricks of how I'm adopting AI into doing my job better, or how I'm helping my partner embrace it, and things for you to think about, right? So it's making it very much a learn and share and tell, right, kind of thing. And to your point, we celebrate those things as well, awards, recognition. And then we also have a culture club where we do fun things with AI. I mean, we've done Shark Tank with AI. We've and that works on pitches and all sorts of different things. But we try to make it fun and approachable in different ways. We've done philanthropic events using AI. So we did a coloring book for a hospital, and everyone just created their own page using AI to do it. So to me, it's about, Matt, making it very approachable, calling it a priority, and then reinforcing it both with the structured learning as well as with the fun ways that you do it through osmosis.
Yeah. That's fascinating, and I love the Learning Fridays / Culture Club. We talk a lot here about making sure that we're preparing the workforce for longevity, right? I mean, I'm obviously on the back end of my career, but many people have got a long way ahead of them, and it's like, listen, the modern workforce, the workforce of the near future, is going to be AI powered but human led, and that's a catchphrase, a kind of a mantra we talk about here. And so we want to help you get ready, and of course, selfishly, that will help the company, right? But it is about preparing for the very near future and the long-term future of work.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's all our responsibility right now to learn and understand and embrace. Now, it's not everyone's forte, right? But what I'm learning is, as if you can get people over that initial, quite honestly, fear hump a little bit, right? And they have the room to do it in a safe environment, the innovation that starts to spur is incredible. So I was mentioning like these apps that are forming even in my own organization, right? Well, yeah, they all had access to Copilot, and they have access to the plugins that we have from other wonderful AI tools out there. And in the beginning, there was some little experimentation, but all of a sudden, I've seen in the last 2 months, the innovation is just incredible, right? And that's where people are literally spending, and I'm not encouraging this, but they're telling me they're spending their weekends or they're waking up in the middle of the night with an idea and jotting it on about how AI can improve the way they're doing their job or improve the business or how Microsoft is helping our partners or showing up for our customers. And I'm just thinking, like, I haven't seen energy in
Yeah.
an employee base like this. Anything's possible. And you're talking about partner development managers that are now able to code whole systems using GitHub and using Copilot. And all of a sudden, they don't have to wait for infrastructure and IT department. They can transform and do the things that they want to do in a matter of minutes sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get, you'd be surprised actually, maybe you would, but how often on a Monday morning I get, a pretty well crafted memo that somebody over the weekend has had a brainstorm and worked through Copilot to actually, put together a sort of anything from a 2-page to sort of 6-page document and opportunity assessment. It's like, okay. And it is exciting because that's when you really unleash the power of the, of the workforce, right. And the individuals within it, because now they're thinking beyond what we can do at a sort of centralized corporate level. So I want to pick up on something you mentioned a few minutes ago, which was really around sort of sales motions, right? And sort of changing how AI is changing those customer conversations or the nature of them. Budget holders, economic decision makers, executives, whatever, don't want sort of feature pitches anymore, right? As you mentioned, they want really defined business outcomes. So how is AI forcing the partners to rethink that traditional product-led selling, and how can they adapt to that?
Yeah, that is the tricky part, right? That is, I think, the biggest learning curve for a lot of the partners right now is how to sell and have those conversations that is very much a consultative, true partner sell than a pitch of a solution. They need to be able to kind of have that conversation around like what's keeping you up at night. If you were looking to grow 2x, right, as a company, what are the markets that are untapped and how are you imagining getting there? And working back in that with that customer in that way, that's very, very different. And it's a much higher skill set sometimes than someone that's going in and pitching a product and doing the hey, we have this feature or function, let me show you, etc. It is a very consultative sale. And for the first time, we've been tossing this around for decades. You want to be the strategic advisor to a client. Well,
Yeah.
honestly, that's now truly the expectation. And if you aren't delivering, the next partner, the next company around there is. And so in order to have and earn a seat at the table to have their business, you have to have that industry depth. You have to have that, be able to have those conversations, and you have to lean in to help them reimagine what's possible in their business.
And so just picking on that a little bit, Nina, so in your, with your seat, obviously you get to see so much, and obviously Microsoft is right at the forefront of this this moment in time that I think, historically we will look back on as a different form of a modern form of an industrial revolution. What kind of what's your advice in terms of the language that resonates with executives and boards versus the language that causes them to perhaps tune out or go look for a different partner?
Yeah. I think you have to speak real business language that wakes them up. Talking about things like what's the competitive risk right now out there in the landscape, or these are the measurable returns you're going to see. So that outcome based return on investment, or what is speed to value, right?
Yeah.
How fast can we get there? How nimble can you as a company start to be, right? You need to be able to really show them what happens if they move and what it costs them if they don't. It's that risk analysis.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll sort of get relegated into, oh, let's try a pilot or let's do an ideation session or something, rather than getting to a core issue that in their boardrooms they're really talking about, and they'll let you in to help solve.
Yeah.
That's what you need. You need to build that
Interest.
trust where you're in on the
Yeah.
real boardroom conversation.
Yeah. And create that outcome, that speed to value, as you
Mhm.
said, right? So
Yeah.
like moving quickly.
Yeah.
What would you say is one AI talking point that buyers perhaps are a little bit jaded, they're a little bit tired of hearing?
Gosh, I think they're tired of kind of hearing about like these the technology and the demos. They don't like there's so much technology out there. I think they really want to hear and understand and be inspired by what customers are doing and what other customers are doing and have seen the impact that it's had on their business. Um, the technology is just an enabler. To me, that is the conversation that follows where they place their trust and what company they place their trust in order to get them there. And so, by talking about examples of what other customers have done that perhaps a partner has impacted and the returns that they're seeing that, showing up with those kinds of proof points in comparable industries or outcomes that the customer can validate in their own way through their own networks, right? That referential network. That is really, really powerful. And that's what they like to hear increasingly. Uh, I almost feel like you need to create that sense of urgency around around that risk of not moving fast enough, right?
Right.
Out there, and that's pretty important. So that time to value, time to innovation, time in the market, that's what they need to hear the most.
Yeah. I love that sense of urgency. I think you, in this current era, I almost think you cannot possibly be moving too fast. I think it's impossible because of the rate of the technology is advancing. You can't possibly be getting ahead of it. So you've got to move faster than you think the organization can move.
You need to be an open. What I would say is, and you also, if I can be frank, I also think the technology is moving so quickly that you want to ground yourself in a technology that is flexible and adaptable. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that I actually like about Microsoft, where we've focused on, hey, let's give you Copilot. And then if you want to use Claude, for example, you can use
Yeah.
that as a plugin. So we don't narrow the client or the customer to one technology, but what we do is we create an environment where you now know it can be secure. You now know that it's going to tap the data resources the right way. It's going to work with your experience in Outlook and Word and PowerPoints and all the data that you're having, but allow the end customer to have that flexibility. To your
Yeah.
point, Matt, as things are moving so fast, and gosh, what you think you know today, it's going to be very different three,
Yeah.
6 months from now.
Yeah. No, I'm by the way, we're a Copilot shop, but I'm also one of the ones using Claude that's in there in my studio. So I want to switch gears a little bit. So a segment we have is sort of signal versus noise. So every episode we'll do a quick segment, right, called signal versus noise. As I said, one thing getting too much attention in the market and one thing leaders should probably be paying more attention to. And Nina, this will be a series of sort of rapid fire questions. So
Right.
here we go. So what's one AI trend getting too much attention right now?
Ooh. I would say probably the agent count, like how many agents are out there. Everyone wants to, and you heard both of us even doing it. We talk about how many agents that we have versus the impact that the agents are having in the deployment.
Yeah,
So
fair
I
enough.
would love for us to get away from the volume into the value of what these guys are,
Right.
what the agents and the technology is doing for us.
I love that. Volume to value. Excellent. Okay, what's one shift in the channel leaders are still underestimating?
Ooh. I think in general, like, are the partners that you're investing in today the same partners that are going to get you there tomorrow, right? In general, so there are so many AI native partners out there right now that they and they're nimble and they're thinking differently and they're approaching the market differently. And all of these little boutique consultancies and vertical specialists, I think they're really something to watch right now. Because look, if you're in the healthcare industry, it it behooves you to talk to someone that really understands running a small little doctor's office. And is there a turnkey solution? How do I get it there? And how do I not have to have a master's in systems and technology, but who
Yeah.
can get me there
Yeah.
really quickly and get the best return on investment? So I'm equipped and I get to do what I want to do, which is actually take care of my patients.
Yes, of course. Okay. And then last question, rapid fire for you. What's
Yeah.
one belief about AI transformation organizations will eventually realize was wrong?
Ooh, I think that they could maybe transform without changing how they're organized. You can't run a frontier firm on an org chart where you have one little group that's focused on AI, right? That's sort of how we used to do it, right? We used to have these like little
Yeah.
pillars. Um, Companies that really get the most out of AI, it's the one that reorganize to the outcomes that they want and they embrace it in everything that they do.
Yeah, I love that. So, a question for you actually that's interesting as well on that, because you mentioned org charts, and one of the things we've been discussing internally, and I'd be curious, Nina, whether you've seen this or whether you're doing this at Microsoft. Obviously, that's a giant org chart, but thinking about putting agents onto the org charts, and so essentially identifying them as full-time employees.
So I think we're already doing this in some ways. We don't necessarily identify them as full-time employees, but where you have to think about this new world where you might have an FTE managing a bunch of agents, right? That are all doing activity. And so where are the escalations? Where are the pattern recognitions? So that's the first thing, right? That the frontline worker per se, or the manager of yesteryear, right? It doesn't always have to be a manager of people. It could be a manager of agents. So that's sort of what you're talking about with the org chart. The other thing is looking at one person and how many agents do they, or what type of agents do they have behind them to do the job that they're tasked to do. We're looking at that as well. The third thing that I would say that I love is we're doing some really innovative stuff from an HR training perspective for our management training. How do you train managers to manage agents? How, because what it is you have to have really good decision making. You have to have pattern recognition, right? You have to, and how do you do that? It's a different skill set. And how do you bring younger generations that perhaps don't have 10, 20, 30 years of experience to be able to manage and make those judgment calls and to see that's the strategy of what to build next or what's needed next, right? Versus managing those. So it's not quite an org chart, right? But we're doing 3 different, I think, really interesting ways to look at it.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, next time we speak, I'm going to hope, I'm going to commit that we were going to have agents sitting below humans in the org chart. So somebody's got responsibility for those agents, because I do think that's the next step for us as a sort of, as a Main Street kind of shop, as it were. So, Nina, we're coming to the end of our time. So we close every segment, right, with a simple question about your path to growth. So what I want to ask you is, as AI is, as we've just been talking about, obviously, is just reshaping expectations across every industry. What have you personally had to stop doing as a leader?
I think I used to, when you had systems, want a more orchestrated review of what infrastructure you're building and why, and an evaluation. Do you have everything figured out? And your SOWs and PRDs, right? All of that stuff. Is it all locked and you're ready before you put hands to a keyboard to build something? And I've had to let go of that entirely, because we're in a world where people, the end users, can actually build what they need. And so it's opening that aperture and allowing the freedom. And so I find my conversation has changed from like trying to make sure I'm working on behalf of my team to build the right infrastructure to how do I create a culture where they can build what they need. And my job is to focus more on making sure, am I giving them the tools, but am I giving it and reinforcing security and compliance and the right data access so that they're doing it responsibly? That's a big tone difference.
Yeah.
And I think how
Yeah.
I've looked to how I lead.
Yeah, interesting. And it takes an awful lot to step back a little bit, and it takes an awful lot to unlearn behaviors that you've learned in a different era that's obviously made you very successful, right? But that's obviously, that's Darwinian, right? That's our ability to adapt to the environment and continue to grow. So as we come to the end, I do kind of want to come back to almost where we started, right? So if there's one takeaway, I would say it's this, and I always like to do a quick rapid fire of some key things I've heard, but AI is no longer a differentiator. It's the execution, right? Execution is that differentiation layer. The next phase of growth in the channel it's going to belong to those partners who can operationalize AI, not just talk about it. And that will mark the difference between those who are on a path to growth and those that get left behind. And I just want to sort of rapid fire back to you some of the key things I heard, Nina, that I just think are really valuable. $18 trillion of untapped opportunity. If anyone's running a business, if that doesn't hit you in the face and make you stand still, I don't know, wake up, I don't know what will. More than once, it's about the data and the security, right? And data governance and making sure things are locked up. Move the conversation around from features to outcomes, right? And outcomes versus transactions, speed to value, and how quickly you can get into that. So leverage that knowledge, as a partner, and drop down into that industry layer, right? And that level of industry expertise you have to help show that business transformation that is really at play here. I did not realize you were doing Learning Fridays and that culture club, and you mentioned culture more than once, and how that's so fundamentally important. And then, of course, that culture of trust, right? And the customer advocacy, trust in your own employees that they're using that time, trust in the technology, and trust that we're doing the right thing for the customer. And then the thing I really, really loved was from volume to value. And just move the conversation in that way. So Nina, this has been a wonderful conversation. Obviously the timing of it is perfect with everything going on in the world. I just want to thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for the opportunity. It's always a blessing, or I'm so excited to see what we're all going to be unveiling and doing. This is we're on a incredible journey together right now. So
yeah. No, we are. I'm trying to build a chief of staff agent for myself at the moment. That's my current little weekend project.
That's good. Chief of staff.
Yeah,
the pilot can do a lot for you.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'll let you know how I get on. So Nina, thanks again. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to The Path to Growth. This episode was hosted by Matthew Yorke, produced by Andrea Medeiros and Caleb Owen, and edited by Caleb Owen. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and make sure you are catching up with CRN for the latest on the IT channel news.